Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
أعلنت شرطة الصربية اعتقال 800 أشخاص من عناصر وحدة.
The Serbian police announced that it has arrested 8 members from the former Special Forces units. They appeared in a videotape as they were executing 6 Muslim men in Srebrenica in a gruesome manner in 1995. Please be advised that the following report contains violent images. Some Serbian officials still deny the Srebrenica massacre, which was committed by Serbian forces in 1995, where 6,000 Muslims were killed. Video images of one example that reflects the ugliness of the massacre were shown during the war crimes trial of the former Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic. The video shows armed Serbian forces from the infamous Special Forces known as a Scorpion Unit, murdering 6 Muslim young men in this brutal manner. First, the 6 handcuffed young men were taken out of the truck, and then they were forced to lay on the ground with their faces facing down. They were ordered to stay next to each other and led to believe that they were about to be killed at any second. However, that never happened. Instead, they were forced to walk one after the other towards a nearby forest and watch each other being killed. The first young man was shot in his back while the rest were watching. Then the second was shot while awaiting their death. The rest of the young men had no other choice but to be subjected to this inhumanity that cannot even be described. The third young man is killed. Then the fourth goes forward quietly and he is also killed. When the first 4 were killed, the handcuffs of the 2 remaining men are taken off and they were ordered to take the bodies to a nearby area where they were piled up on the top of each other. Then the 2 were also killed and their bodies were placed on the top of their friends' bodies.
This is one of the most powerful images that I have seen. I have never seen anything like this in my life. I wonder why you are showing these video images during my testimony.
These were the words of the commander of the Scorpion Unit during his testimony in Milosevic's trial, refusing to identify any member of his unit that appeared in the images that were presented to him in compliance with the War Crimes Court prosecutor's request.
Mr. Stefanovic, I need your help in identifying these men from the Scorpion Unit who took the 6 young men from Srebrenica to be executed. And as you can see here, they were executed.
The Serbian police announced the arrest of 8 members of the Scorpion Unit who appeared in this tape.
وإلى الشأن العراقي فقد شهدت بلدة بلد العراقية القريبة من
In Iraq, the village of Balad near the city of Tikrit witnessed an intense explosion. This was among many violent incidents that took place in other cities throughout Iraq in another day of explosions and assassination operations against officials in the Iraqi police force. American occupation forces did not report any casualties among its ranks, though eyewitnesses gave a contradictory accounts. Iraqi cities were not spared from another bloody day. Today, armed operations resulted in the killing and wounding of dozens of people. These injured children were among those wounded by an explosion in front of one of the mosques in the village of Balad, close to Tikrit, north of the capital. 10 people were killed in the explosion and 13 others were injured. In the capital of Baghdad, 4 Iraqi civilians were wounded by a car bomb explosion that targeted a U.S. occupation forces convoy. An American source did not report any injuries among the soldiers. However, eyewitnesses confirmed the opposite.
The American convoy came from over here and reached there. There was an explosion. No Americans survived.
وفي مدينة كركوك اغتال مسلحون مجهولون العميد صباح قرة التون مدير.
In the city of Kirkuk, unknown armed men assassinated General Sabah Kuratatun, the director of internal affairs for the province, when he was leaving one of the mosques in the city. Near Kirkuk, unknown armed assailants attacked a pipeline, detonating an explosive device, causing it to erupt in fire before firefighters were able to control the fire and put it out.
Israeli soldiers fired rubber bullets and tear gas, wounding a number of Palestinians, including Secretary of the Palestinian National Initiative, Dr. Mustafa al-Barghouthi. This occurred during a peaceful demonstration against the construction of the separating wall in the village of Bal'ain near Ramallah. An Israeli soldier was wounded during confrontation.
ابتكار الوسائل السلمية الجديدة وتسخيرها لعملية التصوير.
New peaceful methods are being utilized to protest the construction of the separating wall in the village of Bal'ain, west of Ramallah. Yet, it hasn't changed the Israeli policies towards the protesters. The peaceful march started from the center of the village and headed toward the direction of the area being bulldozed by Israel in preparation for the building the wall. But fighting soon broke out between the protesters and Israeli soldiers who prevented the protesters from reaching their destination by firing tear gas and rubber bullets.
These plans have led us to present the Palestinian plight and our suffering to the world and to the satellite stations. We want to reveal the truth, and the real monster is the occupation and the way it treats the Palestinians who march in peaceful demonstrations.
The rally was organized by the Popular Committee Against the Wall. Leaders of Palestinian factions and Palestinian MPs marched in the rally, in addition to a number of Israeli peace activists from Israeli peace organizations, especially the Palestinian-Israeli Coexistence Movement.
We came to deliver a message against the wall, the occupation, and the settlements. In addition, we are all protesting together, talking to each other as friends, and this proves that there is another way.
Our message today is mainly against the wall. We are also commemorating the 1967 war and 38 years of occupation in Gaza and the West Bank. We are mainly focusing on Bal'ain because there is a fierce campaign to confiscate a great deal of land for the construction of thousands of housing units for the Kiryat Safir settlement, which will be the largest settlement outpost for religious Jews.
الجدير بالذكر أن الجدار يبتلع حوالي نصف مساحة أراضي.
It is worth mentioning that the separating wall engulfs 50% of Bal'ain's land. Daily confrontations between Palestinians and Israeli soldiers during demonstrations against the construction of the separating wall have created new methods to oppose the Israeli plans and attempts to dismiss the topic of the separating wall from the political arena. Shireen Yunus, Abu Dhabi TV, Bal'ain village near Ramallah.
The Palestinians and Israelis have issued conflicting statements about the venue of a meeting between their leaders expected later this month. While Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said the summit between him and Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon will be held as planned on June 21st, but not in Jerusalem, Sharon's office said the meeting will be held in Jerusalem. Abbas said the meeting will take place in the region, denying rumors he would meet Sharon at the Israeli Premier's home in East Jerusalem. Abbas made the remarks as he returned to Ramallah after meeting President George W. Bush in his first such trip to the U.S. Thousands flee a town in western Ivory Coast after massacre and revenge slayings of at least 70 people in tribal rivalries. Soldiers in trucks mounted with machine guns patrolled the town of Douekoué as thousands of those who could not leave took refuge at the town's Catholic mission. The violence started on Wednesday, where attackers killed at least 41 members of the local Guire tribe, triggering revenge attacks against members of the rival Diola tribe. Meanwhile, Ivory Coast civil war foes traded blame for an explosion of ethnic violence, threatening to derail efforts to end the conflict. A spokesman for President Laurent Gbagbo said a massacre in the western cocoa town of Douekoué bore the hallmarks of the rebels, who seized the north of the world's top cocoa grower after a failed coup in 2002. The rebel new forces accused Gbagbo's ruling FPI party of orchestrating the killings to delay the disarmament of pro-government militias as agreed under an April peace deal.
Hello and welcome. Hundreds of grieving journalists stood in silence in Martyrs Square in Beirut to denounce the assassination of opposition writer Samir Kassir. Journalists gathered around the statue of the Martyrs Square for 1 hour of silence in response to a call for the protest by the An-Nahar newspaper, where Kassir was a prominent editorial writer. Traffic was slow across Beirut, where a general strike was called by the opposition, with some shops, malls and schools remaining shut. A candlelight vigil is planned for this evening on Martyrs Square, and a large demonstration for Monday over Kassir's killing. Protesters are set to hold a peaceful rally near the presidential palace in Baghdad on Monday. The opposition has blamed the pro-Syrian regime for Kassir's assassination and called for the resignation of President Emil Lahoud. Kassir's murder cemented a rift between the opposition and General Michel Aoun, who defended Lahoud. The opposition accused Syria of interfering in Lebanon's politics, blaming Damascus for Thursday's killing of the prominent anti-Syrian journalist, slain by a bomb placed under the driver's seat of his car, as the Lebanese prepared to vote in Sunday's second round of parliamentary elections. A ballot the anti-Syrian opposition hopes to win and end Damascus's control of the legislature. Opposition leaders called for a general strike Friday to protest the killing, carried out even as an international team was investigating the February assassination of slain former Premier Rafiq al-Hariri, whose death led to the ouster of Syrian troops after nearly 3 decades in Lebanon. Opposition leaders linked the two killings. Hariri's son and MP-elect Saad said the same people were behind both assassinations and reaffirmed commitment to independence and sovereignty. Kassir was killed inside his car at mid-morning in the Beirut neighborhood of Ashrafiyeh, where he lived. The bomb set the car afire and shattered windows in nearby buildings. Interior Minister Hassan Sabah estimated the bomb weighed about a pound. He said initial reports indicated it was placed under the car and detonated by remote control. In a recent television appearance, Kassir said he had long received threats by security agents trying to silence him. The assassination of Hariri, a former prime minister and vocal opponent of Syrian influence, sparked protests and international pressure that forced Damascus to end its military presence. The opposition has blamed Syria and its Lebanese ally in the security services for the assassination, a charge Damascus denied. A UN-mandated team led by a German prosecutor is investigating the assassination. Opposition politicians and the United States say Syria has kept intelligence agents in Lebanon, although Syria denies that. The opposition blames the Syrian-Lebanese intelligence apparatus for a series of bombings of commercial areas in recent months that have killed 3 people and wounded more than 24. Kassir's killing comes at a crucial time. The country is in the midst of parliamentary elections which began Sunday and run through June 19th. At the meeting, the opposition reiterated calls for the resignation of Syria's closest ally, President Emil Lahoud. Ilyas Attallah, a senior official in the Democratic Left movement, said the opposition demands by democratic means the resignation of the president, as he is the effective leader of the security intelligence regime. On behalf of opposition factions, he accused President Lahoud of protecting the, quote, hand of terrorism along with the joint Lebanese-Syrian intelligence agencies. They called on the UN to entrust the United Nations Commission that certified the pullout of Syrian forces in April to return to verify the withdrawal of all Syrian intelligence agents. It also called for a massive participation in a demonstration on Monday to denounce the murder of, quote, a pillar of Arab democracy. The closed-door meeting was attended by MP-elect Saad Hariri, influential MP Wali Jumblat, as well as leading Christian figures, and Gibran Basil, son-in-law of former exiled Christian hardliner Michel Aoun. But Basil walked out before the end of the meeting to protest at, quote, the exploitation of the crime. in demanding Lahoud's resignation. He said the security services are now under the control of Hariri followers, referring to the ministers of Interior and Justice. But Atallah Sadaun broke opposition ranks since his return from 15 years of exile in France for waging a failed war of liberation against the Syrians. The opposition strongly condemned the general for forging alliances with staunchly pro-Syrian figures for legislative polls, amid fears that Aoun opted to cooperate with the president and Damascus's allies, reviving their role ahead of elections. Samir Kassir's wife, the star TV show host in Dubai-based Al Arabiya television, Giselle Khouri, is scheduled to arrive in Beirut momentarily. She learned of her husband's murder while in the U.S. Meanwhile, at the presidential palace in Babda, head of the UN team investigating the assassination of Premier Hariri met President Lahoud. German prosecutor Detlef Mehlis was commissioned by the Security Council to probe Hariri's murder. Judge Sami Sidki was today tasked with leading the investigation into Kassir's killing. Edith Karam has the latest on Kassir's murder.
Holding candles and pictures of Kassir, several thousand Lebanese walked silently from central Beirut to the scene of the blast. The 45-year-old's fiery articles against Syria and the Lebanese police state landed him in trouble in 2001 when Syrian-backed security services seized his passport and threatened to detain him. Friends say he was often threatened. In his last column before his assassination, he bemoaned Syria's reluctance to learn from its experiences in Lebanon and allow greater freedom. Colleagues interpreted his killing as an attack on Lebanon's press, a bastion of relative freedom in the Arab world where governments strictly control the media and gag critics. Kassir was one of the first Lebanese journalists to call openly for an end to Syria's tutelage. The killing shook Lebanese, still coming to terms with the murder in February of former Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri, which threw Lebanon into its most serious crisis since the 1975 to 1990 civil war. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese protested after that killing, forcing Syria to bow to international pressure to pull out, and Lebanon's Syrian-backed security chiefs to resign. Stunned journalists, accustomed to blasts that have shaken Christian areas in recent months, stood by the wreck of the booby-trapped car that this time took the life of one of their own. Michael Young, an opinion editor at the English-language Daily Star and a friend of Kassir, said, quote, "This was a barbaric act which shows that far less has changed in Lebanon than we think." Young, himself a vocal critic of Syria, added, quote, "This sends many messages to the opposition, to the press, to An-Nahar, to the Hariri family." Kassir, a published historian, university professor, and activist in the Democratic Left Party, had long called both for Syrian troops to leave Lebanon and for Syria to reform after 42 years of Ba'ath Party rule that had curbed dissent. In his final column on the front page of An-Nahar on May 27th, Kassir wrote, quote, "The rule of the Ba'athist remnants behave in Syria as it behaved in Lebanon, piling mistake upon mistake, and succeeds in simultaneously making enemies of citizens and provoking European states that had checked the United States."
The U.S. and the European Union joined in condemning the murder of Kassir. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice called it a move to intimidate Lebanese voters. Speaking after a U.S.-EU ministerial meeting in Washington, Rice and EU Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana both deplored the killing. With Rice describing it as a heinous act, she said the killers were not known, but pointedly added the assassination came with Lebanon in the midst of legislative elections, following the withdrawal of Syrians. U.S. officials had indirectly blamed the Syrian presence for slaying Premier Hariri's death, but neither Rice nor Solana immediately pointed finger at Damascus in the killing of Kassir. Rice hoped Prime Minister Najib Mikati would carry through his pledge to fully investigate who is responsible for this crime. She said the international community needs to watch carefully, adding Lebanon is going through a difficult and very important period, and efforts to intimidate the Lebanese should be controlled. In Beirut, American Ambassador Jeffrey Feltman condemned in the strongest terms the assassination on behalf of Washington after discussing the bombing with MP-elect Saad Hariri in Kuraitem.
The murder today of the very courageous journalist Samir Kassir. For years, for at least a decade, Mr. Kassir served as the voice of those Lebanese who fought and who yearned for freedom, for independence, for an end to the heavy-handed Syrian occupation of Lebanon. I remember, even since I've arrived, the October 1st attack against Minister Marwan Hamadi, which killed Minister Hamadi's bodyguard. Of course, we all remember the terrible attack on February 14th that killed Prime Minister Hariri and 20 others, including Minister Fleihan. Since then, there have been 6 other bombings, including the one today that killed journalist Samir Kassir. I note that no one has been jailed for these attacks. No one has been caught for these attacks. We in the United States believe that these are mere coincidences. These are targeted murder. These are targeted attacks. We look at the sorts of things that Mr. Kassir had been writing for years on the front pages of An-Nahar, and we can make connections over who his enemies were. The United States stands ready to provide any assistance that might be useful to the government of Lebanon. Let us hope that the days of murdering Lebanese who are trying to fight for the freedom of their country, that those days are quickly over.
God, the compassionate, the merciful. Hello and a very warm welcome to Jam Network News. I'm Anna Pad. Tehran is ready to receive followers and devotees of the late Imam Khomeini to take part tomorrow, June the 4th, at the ceremonies to be held in his mausoleum. Some 600 local and foreign reporters will cover the ceremony to mark the 16th demise anniversary of the founding father of the Islamic Republic. This comes as thousands of university students, as well as people from different walks of life, converged on the shrine of the founding father of the Islamic Republic Friday and paid tribute to the memory of the late Imam. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hamid Reza Asafi says Iranians, with their heavy and zealous turnout at the 9th presidential election, will give a crushing and transparent response to the American officials who tend to interfere in Iran's internal affairs. Asafi said that on Friday, while rejecting claims made by U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, who had portrayed a picture of Iran's election that she put as not pretty.
Concerns that the world has about Iran's own internal developments. I mean, it's not a very pretty picture of this election, quote unquote, that is going to take place in a couple of weeks when candidates have been summarily dismissed by an unelected Guardian Council.
Asafi, meanwhile, said Rice made the remarks having been upset with the positive outcome of Iranian Foreign Minister Kamal Karazi's recent visit to Iraq, which came in contrast with that of her own, ridiculed even by the American media.
UN Secretary General Kofi Annan warned that HIV infections and AIDS-related deaths increased last year, despite growing international efforts to stop the spread of the disease. Delegates from 120 countries, including 40 health ministers, have gathered yesterday at UN headquarters in New York to review progress on goals set by the General Assembly in 2001, which aim to reduce the impact of HIV/AIDS through time targets.
The response has succeeded in some of the particulars, but has not matched the epidemic in scale. Last year saw more new infections and more AIDS-related deaths than ever before. Indeed, HIV and AIDS expanded at an accelerating rate on every continent. Treatment and prevention efforts were nowhere near enough. That is why the fight against AIDS may be the great challenge of our age and our generation.
Here in the Sultanate, the activities of the first family gathering, which started yesterday, continue at Al Asim Public Park in the Wilaya of Barka under the auspices of Her Excellency Dr. Sharifa bin Khalfan Al Yahyai, Minister of Social Development. The gathering comprises many marketing, entertainment and social activities. The whole proceeds are allocated for the needy families in the Wilaya of Barka. The idea of the gathering is based on the volunteer work by the participation of all the individuals of the community and support of government and domestic entities and businessmen from inside and outside of the Wilaya. The activities are distributed between Al Nasim Public Park and the Youth Club. They include the opening ceremony and a number of shows, besides Omani developed art. The other activities comprise the artistic exhibition, Bedouin tent, traditional tent, and other sports shows. Her Excellency, the chief guest, said that the first family gathering at the Wilaya of Barka urges the community and family to pay clear and tangible attention to the family aspects. She added that there are many programs and activities that serve the family in particular and the society in general. The activities of this gathering will continue till the end of July.
يسعى السودان من خلال تشييد سد مروي على نهر النيل لإنتاج الكهرباء بتكلفة.
Sudan is building on the Nile River the Marawi Dam to generate electricity. The estimated cost is $1.8 billion. This should meet the country's demand for energy, and it is a lucrative investment opportunity for Khartoum over the next few years. Now to Osama Abbas in Sudan.
في ظل التوسع الصناعي والزراعي الذي يشهده السودان.
The government has to catch up with the industrial and agricultural growth in Sudan and respond to the increased demand for electricity, which has been a limited resource in Sudan for many years due to weak hydro and coal generators. By building the Marawi Dam, which will be the second largest dam in Africa, the country is taking initial steps to solve this problem permanently. The Marawi Dam is being built 350 kilometers north of Khartoum. It will supply the national electricity company with twice as much power via 1,760 kilometers long cables.
The purpose of the Marawi Dam project is to generate cleaner electrical power. It will produce about 1,250 megawatts of hydroelectricity. There is a great demand for electricity in Sudan, whether for agricultural or industrial purposes. It is well known that Sudan's current ability to generate electricity is weak. So if God is willing, the dam would increase Sudan's electrical power reserve.
هذا السد إن شاء الله يعني يضاعف السعة التركيبية الموجودة في السودان ومع التدفق المستمر للاستثمارات في البلاد.
With the continuous flow of foreign investment into the country, the Sudanese government is hoping to complete this project by the year 2008. They will start the first phase of producing electricity in May of 2007, when 2 out of the 10 generators will be up and running. Chinese companies are helping to build the dam.
We are currently building the dam. Other Chinese companies are helping with the electrical transport cables. If God is willing, then all the work would be completed around the same time. Then, if God is willing, we would be able to produce 1,250 megawatts of power.
The project will cost $1.8 billion and is one of the most important and massive development projects in the country. The government is calling it the End of Poverty project, since it will help 1,000 farmers increase their production through agricultural expansion by using cheaper electricity. Completing the work at the Marawi Dam in northern Sudan will help provide the country with its electricity needs in the future. Osama Abbas, Abu Dhabi TV, at the Marawi Dam, northern Sudan.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.